how would you lay out your vision of where Bitcoin mining has come from and where it is going?
What's going to start happening is mining moving more and more towards the applications where the energy is nearly free.
Bitcoin-powered space heater. This thing's actually mining Bitcoin, which generates heat. It generates waste heat, but you're making use of the waste heat to heat the actual room. So there's an economic efficiency to be gained there.
It becomes a lot more distributed on the physical level, right? It's not thousands of machines in one place. Mm-hmm. It's one machine in every room all around the country and all around the globe.
So the level of effort necessary to try and censor or outlaw Bitcoin mining becomes higher for government.
All the energy that goes into heating. It's not like Bitcoin mining is backed by less energy this way, right? Not at all. But at the same time, in terms of the cost of the mining as a system becomes a lot lower.
So energy and money start to become closely identified. Well, exciting vision that you paint for the future of Bitcoin mining.
Hey everybody, welcome to the What is Money Show. I am thrilled to have you here joining me on my mission to help shine light on the corruption of money. Now, if this is your first time listening to the What is Money Show, I strongly recommend that you go back to episodes 1 through 9 first, which lays a lot of the groundwork for many of the concepts that we explore on the show. These first 9 episodes are my series with Michael Saylor, and thousands of people have told me that this is the best podcast series they've ever heard, hands down, and that it was instrumental to their understanding of money and Bitcoin. So if you're looking to start a deep dive into the nature of money, I don't think there's any place better that you can start other than episode 1 of this show. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. The What is Money Show is 100% sponsor based. So all of our revenues are derived from direct sponsorships. And I strive to be very selective about the sponsors that I work with, specifically only using sponsors that I use personally, and also choosing sponsors that have values which are well aligned to the values expressed on this show, such as freedom, education, self-sovereignty, etc. So what I'm going to do now is a few ad reads right at the top of the show, and then I'll do a few more ad reads in the middle. And I hope you'll take the time to listen to them, as again, these are hand-selected sponsors, and I think you'll like what they have to offer.
Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com. Alex Busarov, thank you for making this trip to Miami to record with me.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's great to have you on. You are the founder of HeatBit.
Yep.
And so we're going to talk a bit today about Bitcoin mining and where it has come from and where it is going, and how you see kind of like a consumer productized future for Bitcoin mining. So maybe we could just start with that. Let's talk about the history of Bitcoin mining. As you were mentioning offline, Bitcoin mining started as kind of like a decentralized hobby thing, right? People were using, I think it was originally CPUs, then GPUs, and eventually progressed to ASICs, which we use today. And then you see, so it's kind of centralized over time into large data centers, and you have a vision of the future that it re-decentralizes in kind of another pathway. So how would you lay out your vision of where Bitcoin mining has come from and where it is going?
It is kind of fun that it kind of started one way, then now it changed this to something completely different, and then it's kind of going back to basics.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of things, right? You can think of how the empires are formed, right? They kind of build up, reach some sort of a peak, and then slowly get smaller. That's kind of what's happening with mining. It started with people mining at home with their CPUs, either with their computers, or some people actually rented instances online. Like our CTO started mining in 2010. But then he used the Bitcoin that he mined at that time, and that was pretty big blocks then. He sold that Bitcoin to pay for the instance. So it was like a hobby for him. He was kind of trying it out. It was kind of cool. So it started that way, and then as more and more people knew about Bitcoin, the mining became more and more valuable. More of the competition started to kick in. People started finding more efficient devices to do mining, and they realized that GPUs, the graphics cards, were more efficient. So the mining kind of moved there. Then the next stage was like, okay, how do we compete further? And then the FPGAs came, which were even more efficient than GPUs. But then very quickly, it was the ASICs, the application-specific integrated circuits, which were specifically designed chips. So that's already kind of pretty deep thing. Specifically designed chips that were only doing the algorithm for Bitcoin mining. They can't do anything else. And then the competition progressed there with just making more and more efficient ASICs. And now we're talking about the ASICs producers basically competing for fab time with companies like Apple. Right? I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure Bitmain is competing with Apple for the fab time and TSMC. Like that's a level where Bitcoin mining already.
You said fab time. Could you describe what that is?
Fab fabrication time for the chips, right? There's only there's very few places that produce this really, really high-end chips. Like the chips that we use in our devices, they only produce, like this technology is only available in two places, in South Korea and in Taiwan. So Bitmain, from what I understand, they produce in Taiwan, for example. So it kind of moved to a lot of the competition, and this is on the technology level. On the business level, what happened was the economies of scale started to play its role. Right. At first, it was okay to just do it yourself, like in the garage, and then as the competition kicked in, people quickly realized that the bigger they are, the better economic deal they could get, and that's true both around the equipment. You basically get a bigger discount with bigger order, and also around energy. Once you started having these big, especially public miners with a lot of access to capital, they can get better deals with the utilities. Some of them sign the contracts directly with governments. And the bigger you are, the better cost of electricity you get. And that led to a lot of centralization. The biggest mining companies right now, they're running the lion's share of the total hash rate. But going forward, it's probably going to change. You look at the CEOs of mining companies, how they speak about the future of mining, and they do see mining as is kind of disappearing and changing its form into something that is completely different. And it's probably going to be driven by the economics. It's not the desire to decentralize the network. It's not the desire to make it green or anything like that. No, it's money. And it's quite simple. In mining, you have two kind of costs, and that's what you compete on. You have the cost of hardware, and over time, hardware becomes more and more of a commodity. That's what happened with CPUs, with DRAM, with hard disk, with anything. All the hardware tends to become a commodity. And you have energy. And energy tends to kind of increase in price. So over time, there's less and less of a competition on hardware, and more of the competition on the energy and the cost of the energy. And this competition is further enforced by the halvings, right? What, a month ago, the revenues of mining companies just halved. Everyone kind of expected that, right? And then 3 years and 10 months later, it's going to be halved again. In Bitcoin terms. In dollar terms, we'll see. Depends on the price of Bitcoin, of course. But what's going to start happening is mining moving more and more towards the applications where the energy is nearly free. And there's different sources for that. One of them, and that's what we focus on, enabling that application, is coupling mining with another energy use like heating. But there are others where mining companies look at things like stranded gas. It's essentially gas which is right there. It's just, they just flare that gas for no reason. And you can kind of use it to create energy that you could use for mining. So that's another direction that mining could take. And I think it's going to take both.
That's interesting. So we talked about this offline. Money then drove the decentralization of mining over time and towards ASICs, towards the data center model, which is what largely characterizes the Bitcoin mining network today. We have, as you mentioned, a few large public companies. There's a few large mining pools. Most of them are, data centers inside warehouses. But you see this world where money, or let's say the economics more generally, actually drives the network back towards a more decentralized format. But this is going to be, it's not the, as you said, it's not the pursuit of environmentalism or anything like that. It's the fact that the waste heat from the mining process is not currently being monetized is one aspect. You also mentioned sort of using, energy sources like natural gas that are just literally being flared, right? They're just being burned, destroyed, not turned into anything. Those can be monetized. So that economic dynamic will actually drive the network back towards something that's more decentralized. How does that work? Is this just a matter of, and why was it money that drove it to be centralized and now it's driving it back towards decentralization? Was the technology lagging? Like, what was the reason for centralization and then subsequent decentralization?
So the technology is already there, and I think the technology in terms of ASICs is kind of reaching its peak. It's going to be very hard to push the ASICs much, much further. Like I said, the ASICs that are used for mining already, they are already at the forefront of the chip tech. They can't really go that much more efficient. It's going to be hard. And at the same time, the hardware is becoming more and more commoditized. There used to be only one really big ASIC chip producer. Now there's a few more coming in. Everyone knows about Block. How they're working in the chips. There's few other companies working on the chips in California and Europe, and some are public, some are not yet public about this. And there's just more and more of the opportunity to create the devices that could make better use of energy. And when I say better use of energy, it's when you combine it with mining. You combine mining with another use. So when you let me talk about the physics of the whole thing. Like when you heat your house, and we're in Miami, so you probably don't heat your house that much. I appreciate that.
Mostly cool.
But a lot of people around the world, especially in the north, they do heat their houses, and they use a lot of electricity for that. It's about 600 terawatt hours of energy that's used for residential electric space heating. Bitcoin mining uses about 150. So it's actually a much bigger use of energy than total Bitcoin mining globally.
Got it.
And the way this heating works is there's electricity, there's energy in the form of electricity that converts pretty much 1-to-1 into heat. So you use 1 unit of energy, which is in the form of electricity. It goes through the regular heating coil, and it just converts into heat. That's it. That's all your heater does. And maybe there's a fan that kind of distributes this heat around the room.
Right.
Now, you can do the same thing with a silicon chip. If you ever played, a computer game in a relatively small room, you might actually feel that room kind of heats up. That's because your computer uses electricity, and through the silicon chip, the electricity goes through the silicon chip. It also has resistance, just like the heating coil. And all of the energy in the form of electricity turns into heat. So whether you do it with a regular heating coil or a silicon chip doesn't really matter for the physics. You get just as much heat, but you kind of get something else. If you're playing, you kind of get the game going.
Entertainment.
Or if you're mining, you also do the calculations that are useful for running the Bitcoin network. So essentially, you're using energy for two things at the same time in this way. And another way to look at it is that you're actually not using any extra energy for the mining, because you use as much electricity, you get just as much heat. So the mining from the energy standpoint kind of comes for free. And that creates an economic advantage. Now, that's the nature of heating, is that it kind of has to be distributed to a large extent. It's very hard to distribute heat. So that kind of forces the mining to be back to a lot more distributed model, kind of bringing mining back home, if you want.
I see. Okay, so making use, in this case, you're talking about your particular product is a Bitcoin-powered space heater. All right, so the unit, a space heater, like you would set in the middle of your room that generates heat proximate to the room, this thing's actually mining Bitcoin, which generates heat. It generates waste heat, but you're making use of the waste heat to heat the actual room. So there's an economic efficiency to be gained there. Whereas normally that's problematic, I guess, for the data center model, right? They're trying to pump out that heat so they can keep...
Yeah, I didn't go too deep into this, but if you look at the energy consumption of a data center, I don't have data specific for Bitcoin mining data centers, but a general data center, you would use 1 unit of energy for computations and about 0.4 units of energy on top of that for cooling the equipment, right? And at the same time, there's someone else somewhere in the north that's using another unit of energy to heat themselves,
right,
with a Dyson or whatever else, regular heater.
Yeah.
So by combining all three, instead of 1 plus 0.4 plus 1, you just use 1 unit of energy to get the same results.
I see.
Same amount of computations and same amount of heat for a lot less energy.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. And then what is this doing for, in terms of like, when we say decentralizing the network, we mean geographically, physically decentralizing it? We mean organizationally? Like how is this actually changing the contours of the Bitcoin mining network?
So right now, mining, because it's largely done by the large data centers, we tend to call them sweatshops in the team. These are very centralized points. There's not that many of them. Everyone knows where they are. If hypothetically the government wanted to shut it down, they could. That would be not that hard. We've seen what happened in China in 2021, right? The hash rate went down a lot very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And it's possible with any mining company and with any big data center. Now, the model that we're talking about, just because the heat and how we do the space heating, it's decentralized by default. Everyone is heating a little bit in their own bedroom, right? It becomes a lot more distributed and a lot more distributed on the physical level, right? It's not thousands of machines in one place. It's one machine in every room all around the country and all around the globe. Most countries in the certain geographies do the heating, and most people, like there's billions of people with a heater around the world. That's what makes the mining a lot more decentralized on the physical level.
I see. And then the more decentralized it is physically, does that then change how the mining pools are coalescing? Or like, how would these at-home miners, would they participate in mining pools, or what does that look like?
That's the beauty of it. They can choose what they do.
Okay.
Right? There's kind of like a bit of political power that comes with it, right? Because as the miner, you support one direction or another. It's up to you. Some people will choose certain pools, some people will choose other pools, some people will do solar mining, and it's really up to them. You could call it ultimately the very geographic, the very democratic way of running mining. Whether some people will be choosing the pools and block templates, like especially with Stratum V2, right? They can essentially choose their own block templates. They will choose, okay, I'll just pick anything that pays more. Fine. Someone else will be like, no, I don't like ordinals. I'm not gonna process any transactions that involve ordinals. Fine, that's your choice, right? And people make their own choices, and that's essentially how the mining becomes a lot more democratic. And people just choose what they want.
Interesting. Have you ever wanted to live in an off-grid community with complete food, energy, and water independence? If so, then you need to check out the farm at Okefenokee. The farm is a pioneering community designed to foster longevity and well-being, eliminating elements that detract from these goals. At the farm, the convergence of nature, nutritious food, a supportive community, and the ethos of slowing down is unparalleled. Positioned at the gateway to the UNESCO World Heritage nominated Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, the farm at Okefenokee stands as a testament to a lifestyle that truly nurtures health and happiness. Unlike conventional housing developments where a token communal garden may suffice, the farm itself is the community. Small, intimate micro-villages seamlessly integrate into the fabric of a sprawling agricultural community. So if you're interested in joining this off-grid community, then go to okefarm.com today to learn more about becoming a member. Make sure to tell them that I sent you for a $21,000 discount on their custom cabin pricing. Again, go to okefarm.com to learn more about joining this revolutionary regenerative agriculture community. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. So I guess part of the benefit here of this vision of the future of a re-decentralization, although a different type of decentralization than originated in Bitcoin mining, is a increase in the number of enforcement points, basically. So if the government did try to shut it down, there's a lot more throats to choke, so to speak. So the level of effort necessary to try and censor or outlaw Bitcoin mining becomes higher for government.
That's one part. There's a second part to it that I think is also important. Most of the reason, at least so far, for the government to take any negative action against Bitcoin was, big part of it was to do with the energy consumption of mining. Because the way that the government sees it and how a lot of people would see it would be, mining uses so much energy, it takes the energy out of other energy uses, drives the tariffs up, etc. And this may or may not be true, but that's where a lot of the negativity around Bitcoin may be coming from. And when it's combined with heating, like in the model that we're talking about, instead of this thing that uses so much energy, it becomes something that helps to pay the bills. So, why would government try to take any negative action against a system that helps their citizens pay the bills or keep warmer? I don't know if it was as much of an issue in the US last year, but there's been a lot of issues with heating in the UK last year, for example, right? The price of energy has gone up a lot, and it was hurting people. If there was something that was helping to pay the bills at the same time, I mean, great. Like people keep warmer, people keep happier. Why not?
Right.
It changes the paradigm a lot, you see?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And another thing you said offline that I thought was very interesting is that under the current model, many of these Bitcoin miners are very price sensitive. So if the price drops below a certain threshold relevant to their capital model, right, depending on how much debt equity mix they have, what is their price point, average mining price point of producing a Bitcoin, other factors, other inputs that they would actually turn off, right, at a certain Bitcoin price point. Whereas some of these Bitcoin home miners or waste heat miners would be much less price sensitive, if not completely price insensitive, since they're actually using it for the utility of the waste heat itself. Could you talk about how that works?
Sure. So if you look at the public miners, they obviously have different balance sheets, but a lot of them are pretty leveraged, and they kind of depend on the price of Bitcoin. If hypothetically tomorrow the price of Bitcoin went down to $1,000, most of the big public miners would have to shut down. Maybe after some time, because some of them have a good cash cushion, but they would have to shut down. It's just the economics would not work for them. The mining would not cover the proceeds from the mining in dollar terms would not cover the costs. Now, if we're talking about the situations where mining is combined with heating, the mining itself doesn't use any extra energy. There's no need for you to turn off the device. You use the electricity that you would use for heat anyway. Your power bill is actually the same. Why will you turn it off? You, irrespective of the price of Bitcoin, you just have the sats on top of whatever you do anyway. And you become the most resilient miner. So in aggregate, this use case actually makes the mining a lot more resilient. On top of that, like as a an extension of that, while the big miners, they kind of have to sell the Bitcoin because they need to pay the power bills in dollar terms, and they need to pay Bitmain or for those machines in dollar terms. Home miners, they don't really have to sell. Some of them will see it as, well, that's something that helps me to pay the bill, so they would sell and again, pay for the bill in dollar terms. Some of them will say, well, I just got free sats, I'll just keep them. Why not?
That makes a lot of sense. And then you were talking about the efficiency. I think you mentioned this earlier, that the efficiency is basically 100% because Bitcoin mining, the heat is being generated from the resistance of the actual circuits themselves, I suppose. So essentially all of the electricity flowing through those circuits is going towards generating hashes, which are guesses to the current puzzle. But only the one guess that is correct is really the one that is not wasted, so to speak, and all the rest of that is generating waste heat. But if you use that waste heat, well, then it's no longer wasteful, right? You're using it to heat the space or whatever it may be. So you're basically getting a 100% efficiency on this. Is that, am I saying that
exactly.
correctly?
You see, whether you convert electricity into heat with a regular heating coil, you kind of get 100% efficiency with that. Or you use a silicon chip, you still get the same 100% efficiency in terms of the conversion from electricity to heat. But if you do it with a silicon chip, you're doing very useful calculations in the meantime, and that's called Bitcoin mining.
Wow. Is it possible that this could also apply to AI at some point, that people would use these types of devices to power AI?
It is. And when we looked at AI, I think it will move that way. Actually, AI is using more and more of energy as well. The computational power for AI has grown about 1 million times in the last 7 years. It's huge. But with that, you also have the increases in efficiency of the hardware. And while in AI, the efficiency of the hardware and including energy efficiency of the hardware kind of compensates for the growth of the compute in AI. But in Bitcoin mining, it's hardly possible to go much further in terms of the
ASICs
hardware
have been pushed
efficiency.
so far.
Again, you can't. You can only push those ASICs so far. So that's why it's a lot more relevant in Bitcoin mining. Plus, depending on the kind of computations that you do for AI, not AI can be split into this small atomic kind of nodes. With Bitcoin mining, they're just as efficient if you kind of split them on the computational level. But with AI, AI computations can be what's called state dependent. So the computation of one node determines what the other node needs to do.
I see.
Which means you need to have a lot of the data transfer between the two.
Got it.
So you can't just have for most of the AI computations, you can't just have it split into thousands or millions of the nodes during the computation.
I see. So the nodes need to be closer together for higher throughput, whereas in Bitcoin mining, you're really just casting the guess, basically.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. You also mentioned there's a possibility here. I think you said heating globally is like using 4 times the total energy of the Bitcoin mining network, but air conditioning is even higher than that. It's something like, I think you said 10 times.
More than 10 times. So I'll bring the numbers. So Bitcoin mining is different kind of assessments, but the one we go with is about 150 terawatt hours. Not all heating, but just the residential electric space heating. All heating is much, much bigger. But the residential electric space heating is 600 terawatt hours. And air conditioning, residential air conditioning is 2,000 terawatt hours.
Okay.
So in terms of electricity consumption, cooling is much bigger than
13 or
Bitcoin
14x
mining.
times that. Okay.
And coming to mining and cooling, it kind of sounds a little counterintuitive, right? I mean, with heating, kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But with cooling, turns out there is a physical process where it's possible to use the waste heat, and essentially you get the heat that comes from mine. It's waste heat. Essentially, you can use that waste heat to power a heat pump process. It works on slightly different compounds and slightly different principles than your usual AC, but it still works. And we have it in the works on the prototype level. It's very far from being a product, but hopefully it will come up at some point. It's very, very early right now. That one would be a little less efficient than the traditional cooling, traditional compressor-based cooling on the physical level. So there's something called coefficient of performance. So that's the relationship between the amount of energy that you use and amount of energy that you move from the indoors to the outdoors, which is cooling. So for a good AC, you would have it around 3. For the AC that is based on heating, where you can essentially use the Bitcoin miner, this coefficient of performance drops to below 2. So on a physical level, it's kind of less efficient. But if you consider the fact that most of the energy that comes from Bitcoin mining, it could be covered with the proceeds from Bitcoin mining itself. On the economic level, it could be the most efficient way to cool your house.
I see. So there's also the possibility the waste heat could be used to power air conditioning, although this is not fully productized yet. In theory, it is possible, albeit a little bit less efficiently than just using the waste heat purely as heat. I guess this would mean that cohort of users would also be a little more price sensitive, I assume, if it's less efficient than just using the waste heat as heat.
Correct. So this is where some of the price sensitivity would be introduced. And then we'll see, maybe through the technology advancements that maybe we don't see yet, the physical efficiency can improve a lot as well. And in this case, we can get to the same kind of conditions like with heating, when irrespective of the price, you still want to feel cool and you just cool your place.
Yeah. Do you see a world then that all smart devices, if they have latent capacity, are they then using that capacity to mine Bitcoin? Do you see us moving towards that type of world, or like even your smartphone that's charging overnight, like is it mining Bitcoin while you're not using it?
Yeah, it can. So it's probably not going to go to the very, very extreme. Like with the phone, it makes a little less sense because the keeping energy on the phone is kind of expensive, right? So it's not going to come that far. And also, you need to have certain good utilization of the hardware. Like, I'll give you this example. If let's say you have a kettle, for making tea, and it heats the water with mining Bitcoin. If it only heats the water when you press the button and it works for like a couple of minutes, and then you use it, I don't know, 5 times in a day, you utilize those chips only 10 minutes in a day. That makes it very uneconomical because those chips are not going to be cheap. Right. So if you use them only 10 minutes in a day, the utilization is very, very low. That's not great. But if that kettle also is enabled to keep the water warm throughout the day, and keeping the water warm, that's what's done by the chips, then you have close to 100% utilization. And it starts to make a lot of sense.
Interesting. So this is, what are we describing here? Like a Bitcoin, I guess you can look at this one of two ways. If your aim is to mine Bitcoin, then the waste heat that you're using to heat your house or to drive possibly an air conditioner becomes a subsidy or an added benefit to the process of Bitcoin mining. Or if your aim is to heat or cool your house, then you get this subsidy of Bitcoin mining offsetting the heating or cooling bill. And which is, I guess, two different ways of saying the same thing. You're using the energy more efficiently.
Yep, exactly.
And so that efficiency then gets absorbed into the network through this decentralization of the mining process into consumer products generally, but more specifically space heaters or possibly cooling systems.
Yep.
Are there other major consumer appliance categories that you see this working its way into?
Water heating.
Water heating.
Yeah. We all heat water for our daily needs, and I think that's
refrigerators, freezers, like anything else.
Yeah, those can do as well. Okay. I think those are just gonna take a little longer because people tend to. It takes a certain amount of time before people buy the next new fridge.
Yeah.
It's easier to buy a heater than to buy a fridge.
Right.
Just for this kind of reason, it's just gonna take a little longer. But yeah, exactly the same.
Oh, gotcha. So the hardware refresh cycle is just longer on a refrigerator, so it'll take longer for this technology to penetrate that sector.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank my friends at Swan Bitcoin for their long-standing support of the What is Money show. Swan's mission is to help millions of people get into Bitcoin, so they built the best solution to set up recurring Bitcoin buys and automatic withdrawals into cold storage. With the Swan app, it takes just 2 minutes to sign up and start buying Bitcoin. If you're a new customer, you get $10 in free Bitcoin for signing up, and the first $10,000 of Bitcoin you buy incurs 0 fees. If you're an existing Swan customer, then the next $10,000 of Bitcoin you buy now incurs 0 fees. So if you love to recommend Bitcoin to friends and family, then Swan is the best place to start. So go to swanbitcoin.com/breedlove to get started today. Again, that's swanbitcoin.com/breedlove. Are you sick of being robbed by politicians through inflation and endless money printing? If so, you need to be at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, Tennessee on July 25th through 27th. As the largest Bitcoin and Fintech conference in the world, Bitcoin 2024 stands as a beacon of monetary freedom, a glimmer of hope amongst a darkening macroeconomic backdrop. Top speakers, companies, and thought leaders from across the industry will convene in Nashville to look ahead to the next year and beyond. I will be there, and Bitcoin conferences like this have become my favorite place to socialize since becoming a Bitcoiner. Ticket prices will increase soon. Get your tickets now and secure your spot at this game-changing event. So go to b.tc/conference and use discount code BREEDLOVE to sign up for the Bitcoin 2024 conference. Again, that's b.tc/conference, discount code BREEDLOVE.
Okay. And what does this do? I guess what is the impact on the Bitcoin mining network? You talked about that efficiency actually improving Bitcoin as a system overall.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that? Is it
This is actually a very interesting point. When you so think of an ideal engineered system, any system, not just Bitcoin. Any ideal engineered system would serve its function, otherwise it's useless. It would not take any space, and it would not use any energy. So it's never achieved this way, but the further it can get along these axes, the better, the more ideal it is. Now, for Bitcoin, well, it serves its function. It doesn't really take any space, but it uses quite a lot of energy. And by using no extra energy, like when we talk about heating, this way mining doesn't use any extra energy. So the Bitcoin becomes a lot more of an ideally engineered system. And surprisingly, I was fascinated to see it on bitcointalk.org, on the old Bitcoin chat forum. Satoshi spoke about this back in 2010. He was like, "Yeah, it's probably going to move into heating because it kind of becomes free because it's cheaper, so it's going to move there." He was still speaking about the CPUs. He didn't speak about the ASICs, but same thing. So he could kind of envision this is moving this way, and it's just kind of happening right now. So so it kind of becomes the Bitcoin as a system becomes a lot more of an ideally engineered system when you compile mining with solutions like energy, not affecting negatively the security of the system, because the security of the system is still backed by all the energy that goes into heating. It's not like Bitcoin mining is backed by less energy this way, right? Not at all.
right?
In fact, it's probably going to grow because it becomes cheaper.
Demand.
More miners can join, and but at the same time, in terms of the cost of the mining as a system becomes a lot lower.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So the total energy allocated to the security budget for the Bitcoin network remains the same, even though some of that energy is being used as waste heat to power either heating or cooling or whatever it may be. That is interesting. So what does this mean for the general understanding of Bitcoin? Like, so you then end up with people that maybe just want to buy a space heater, but this particular space heater that also mines Bitcoin behind the scenes is just more cost effective because it's using the Bitcoin mining as a subsidy for the heating expense. So maybe someone buys a space heater that doesn't give a shit about Bitcoin, but they are then perhaps getting orange pilled, or at least getting the possibility of learning about Bitcoin. So what does this have an impact on how the Bitcoin idea or the orange pill spreads across the minds of men? Like, how does this change Bitcoin education?
I think it does. So a lot of people could basically become the Bitcoin miners, not even realizing that. So it starts with like, oh, I just have this keys, and it's somewhat different, and maybe it pays me a little bit and helps me to cover the bill, or maybe it gives me some perk on top of that. But then some of the people will start wondering, but what's going on there? Like, why? And then they start learning about mining and about Bitcoin. And it's a process. I think every one of us has gone through a certain process. And most of the friends that I introduced Bitcoin to, the first reaction, I don't know if that was your case as well, but first reaction, if they were completely like knew nothing about Bitcoin, I start talking about this like, oh, that sounds like a scam. Or another reaction would be like, oh, but that's just for drugs and other illegal stuff. And that's the first reaction of a lot of people. That was kind of my first reaction when I heard. But then you listen more and you hear more and you learn more, and we call it the rabbit hole, right? People get into it and learn more and start to appreciate the beauty of it. So, in fact, if you think of it, this way of learning about Bitcoin can be actually even better than how it normally happens right now. Most people get into Bitcoin with the price speculation, like, oh, Bitcoin has reached this and that. Like, Bitcoin reaches new all-time high. This is when people are rushing to open accounts and all sorts of exchanges and, find ways to buy Bitcoin. And then it's volatile, it goes down, and then all these people become disappointed. And it kind of hurts the general appreciation of Bitcoin. So if they don't go through the speculation route into learning what Bitcoin is and the value of it, but go through something else, which doesn't really depend on the price of Bitcoin that much, and something that just gives them an extra benefit anytime, maybe a bit more, a bit less, depending on the price again, but always gives them a benefit, then maybe there would be less of the kind of ups and downs in terms of the appreciation, the general mood around Bitcoin as well. So it's a basically better way to orange pill.
Yeah, because everyone up until this point that gets into Bitcoin gets into it because of Bitcoin's price.
That's
maybe not miners, right? But even miners to some extent, because if you don't, especially if you're holding Bitcoin on your balance sheet as a miner, obviously you're speculating on future price appreciation. Maybe if you're selling all of it every time you generate any Bitcoin revenue, then you're taking pretty minimal exposure to Bitcoin price, let's say. But basically every holder is definitely speculating on Bitcoin price, right? That's what holding is you're holding it in anticipation of the thing's purchasing power going up. But you're saying here, this would be a new channel for orange pilling people that's not based on Bitcoin price speculation, but is based on actual utility from the network, non-monetary utility at that, right? Just using the waste heat for different economic purposes.
Correct. I would just add that when you call it speculation, I think there's different kinds of speculation, right? There's once kind of a short-term speculation, like, oh, I'm going to buy it at X, and in 3 months, maybe I can sell it at 2X. It's kind of short-term speculation that actually gets a lot of people burnt.
Yeah.
And then, there's kind of a bad taste that stays, I think, for a lot of people. That's not great. If you go through the other route and you through this economic efficiency, combining it with heating, cooling, or whatnot, you don't have the expectation that you're going to get rich from your space heater. I hope you don't, right? And you just learn about this, and then you start getting some sats, and then maybe you start buying more at the end as well. But that's the entry point. Is not about I'm gonna get rich overnight, and maybe I'll get burned because of that. The starting point is like, but there's this system and there's certain benefit that comes with it, and it's kind of continuous. And with that, the chances of someone learning more about Bitcoin and really starting to appreciate it, and can call it speculating, but I think when people hold it really long term, that's less of the speculation, right?
Yeah.
That's more of a I just believe in it and I'll hold it. The chances of person becoming a long term holder are much higher.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's a good point. When I use the word speculation, it's often thrown around with a negative connotation, but I don't use it that way. I actually consider all human action to be speculative. Like, we never know the outcome, right? We're constantly testing what we think will happen. We take an action, we think something will happen, and then it either happens or it doesn't happen. If it doesn't happen, then we adjust. If it does happen, we might repeat. So yeah, when I say speculation, I'm saying as a holder of Bitcoin, I have an anticipation that its purchasing power will go up into the future, which is expressed by my action of choosing to hold it and not spend it, right? And fiat would be the opposite, right? If you expect the purchasing power of fiat to go down over time, you would have an incentive to spend it. You're almost, by spending it, you're speculating that the purchasing power is going to go down, because it means you wanted something more now than the loss of purchasing power in the future. So yeah, that's a good point. I use that word with a much less negative connotation than most people do.
I just wanted to make sure that people understand I understand what you mean.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about residential heating, residential cooling. Does this have any application to the commercial heating and cooling, or any commercial space whatsoever?
Same thing. There's plenty of heating and cooling that's used in commercial spaces, shops, malls, cafes, exactly the same kind of ideas, maybe just slightly different devices, maybe slightly bigger devices, maybe something that, built into this whole, bigger system.
Right.
Similar kind of applications that are going to be happening in industry as well. Industry uses a lot of heating, a lot of cooling, and I think Bitcoin mining is going to get into those as well. I just recently I saw an interview by Fred Thiel, the CEO of Marathon. He's talking about how Marathon is going into the industrial heating. Essentially, they're going to use miners to preheat certain industrial processes that, instead of using any kind of other electricity and just spending money on that, they're going to use Bitcoin miners to preheat certain things, and that's going to make the whole industrial process more efficient. So similar kind of ideas.
What does the scale look like if it goes from residential to commercial? I assume commercial's larger.
So if
Maybe
you
not. I'm not.
if you look at every one particular device, of course, that's going to be larger, right?
Sure.
Because you kind of heat or cool bigger spaces,
Right.
But if you look at the energy consumed, residential can be much bigger.
Oh, residential is much bigger. Okay, so commercial would just be some additional percentage points on top of the residential.
It's not
application.
small.
Yeah,
it's still pretty big. But I kind of feel a little better about residential for other, not always economic reasons, right? When we spoke about the decentralization and getting people to learn properly about Bitcoin,
right.
If it's residential, kind of it's closer to the people, if you know what I mean.
Gotcha. Very interesting. Are there any other big visions you have for the future of Bitcoin mining? Like where it is today to where it's going in the future? Are there any other, even if it's just theoretical, like how else do you see this space evolving into the future?
You know how I remember the time when to access internet, I had to go to a specific merchant. Like we had internet at university. I had to go to university to access internet. And the information that you could get on the internet was still pretty limited. Again, it wasn't as big of an industry. Not as many people could access it. Now, to access internet, maybe I just need to speak louder because that would be like an Alexa.
Yeah,
I can ask her questions.
Yeah,
or I pick my mobile and access the internet, and it becomes such a usual part of life, right? When I had to go to, in my case, university to access internet, there was a specific thing. It's like, tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'm going to university because I need to check my email.
Right.
And it was a very narrow, limited part of life. I think something similar is going to happen with Bitcoin mine. Right now, it's for most people, it's like, this thing out there that uses a lot of energy. Like that's how general public would mostly perceive Bitcoin mining. I think it's going to get to the point when it's like, this thing is mining and that thing is mining and that's okay.
Does it get absorbed just into the background? Like, will people just be getting more cost-effective devices? Like we mentioned, heating and cooling. Maybe it's, I don't know, general computation on a computer or refrigeration, whatever it may be. Is this something that'll just be happening in the background and people won't really be aware of it, or do you think people actively?
Same as with the internet. My phone is laying here. It's accessing internet every few seconds. There's apps running on this phone to kind of check the email, messaging apps, push notifications getting pushed to it. Do I actively think about this? Not really.
Right.
It's just happening. It's kind of the usual part of life now.
Right. Interesting.
I think something similar is going to happen to mining. And people are not going to think about mining. It's just going to be, around as the chips here and there, things are running. And at the same time, by then, people will realize that, that's what's actually powering the financial system. So it's not going to be mining disconnected from like that. There's not going to be like mining and dollars. It's like mining and money.
So energy and money start to become closely identified.
Whether you think about this actively or not, I don't know. but everyone having a few devices, not just mining, but supporting the financial system. And then, your sats here and there, using your, heater, cooler, kettle. You see the future I'm painting?
Yeah. No, that's really cool. Well, exciting vision that you paint for the future of Bitcoin mining.
Thank you.
I appreciate you doing this. If you have any closing words, please let us know where we can find you on the internet.
Well, the website would be heatbit.com. You can see what we do in there. You can always reach me through the support. Just ask that you want to speak to Alex, the founder, and they'll put you in touch. Other than that, just wanted to thank you for the invitation to speak. Much appreciated. And let's see what the future brings.
Let's see. Thank you so much.
Thank you.